What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Jeremy Hoffman. I'm the Chief Scientist at the Science Museum of Virginia, and I'd like to share with you my top 5 climate science stories of 2020. First off, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The novel coronavirus and its disease, COVID-19, has fundamentally reshaped our daily lives, at least for the time being. Way back in March, when large-scale national lockdowns were taking place, much of human activity stopped altogether. Things like cars, trains, planes, ships were suddenly stopped. And because these things are mostly powered with fossil fuels, we saw large decreases in the amount of heat-trapping gases and other pollutants being released into the atmosphere during these unprecedented lockdown periods. This led to some of the best air quality some places have experienced in a long time. Depending on the study you've seen, daily emissions of heat-trapping gases dropped by almost 20% in April alone, larger than any other decrease that occurred during the previous economic downturns or even World War II. The downside, these decreases were momentary events. Climate scientists agree that we need to be cutting our emissions by about 8% every single year, permanently, to avoid 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. So we have a lot of work to do. Number 2, a host of hurricanes. Atlantic hurricane season runs from June to the end of November. And every year, research meteorologists forecast about how many storms we might experience that given year. 2020 ended up being one for the record books, with 30 named tropical storms. That's a new record for most storms in a year, and 12 landfalling hurricanes here in the United States. That's a new record for landfalls on our shores. Some estimates of the damages due to this year's wild hurricane season put the number over $40 billion. Be sure to check ready.gov for ways that you can make your family more resilient to next year's hurricane season. Number 3, is it getting hot in here? 2020 global temperatures may tie or exceed the current record holder, 2016, which was the last big El Niño Southern Oscillation event. This isn't particularly surprising, given that the last 6 years have all been among the hottest on record. The 2010s have been the hottest decade on record, and many reconstruction efforts of Earth's climate over the last several thousand years suggest that this century is among the warmest we've ever experienced. The WMO released a report suggesting that 2020 global temperatures may break 1 degree Celsius warming above the pre-industrial period, bringing us ever closer to the 1.5 Celsius target set by the Paris Climate Accords. Locally, Virginia's 2020 may go down as the top 5 warmest year on record during the warmest 5 years on record. Here in Richmond, it's also looking like a top 5 finish. All right, number 4, wacky freeze season. Locally, we've experienced the last freeze of the winter, or the last evening where temperatures hit 32 degrees Fahrenheit or colder on record at the Richmond airport, after what would have been the earliest. I know that sounds confusing. Let me break it down. Our last freeze of the winter occurred on May 10th, an uncharacteristically late date, as our last freeze typically happens in early April or even late March. Long-term warming of the climate here in Richmond and everywhere else has favored earlier and earlier last freeze dates. On the other side of the summer, our first freeze of 2020 was really late. It finally dropped below the 32 degree Fahrenheit threshold on November 18th. Last century, first freezes typically occurred the 3rd or 4th week of October. Nowadays, they're moving ever later into the autumn, consistent with a changing local climate, and with large cascading impacts on our local flora and fauna. Ending on a positive note, the Commonwealth is leading in the climate change policy world by enacting the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which sets Virginia to get to zero carbon emissions by 2050. While these plans currently fall short of benchmarks set by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change over the next few years and decades, and some environmental and business groups have their reservations about particular aspects of the policy, the Virginia Clean Economy Act represents one of the largest leaps forward in energy policy for any state in the entire country. And it promises to serve as a model for other states looking to transform their carbon footprint and take action on climate change. Thanks so much for watching our video on the top 5 climate stories of 2020. Be sure to check out smv.org for more about climate change in the Commonwealth.